All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. And as promised, a very special guest, a man without whom Washington would have a lot more secrets. Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, the man who has exposed everything from Pete Strzok's text to the wiping of Andrew Weissman's phone. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Hey, John, good to be with you again.
It's an honor to have you on. Last week, another example of your great work on behalf of the American people. You exposed documents showing that several members of Robert Mueller's staff, including his chief deputy, Andrew Weissman, wiped their phones and essentially erased government data from government phones. Can you tell us the latest about what you know about it? And also, do you see any legal violations here that might have been committed by the team, by Team Mueller?
Well, it looks like there were upwards of 31 phones, John, that were wiped or destroyed or otherwise missing on the Mueller team. And all this arose in the course of an IG investigation when it emerged that there were texts between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok that showed political bias. And of course, they were working on the Mueller operation. And so they're asking Mueller for their information. And it turns out they had deleted text by resetting the phone, supposedly.
Wow.
So there were missing text messages. So we asked for information about that, and boom, we find out that the investigation found that there was a pandemic of wiped phones there. I don't know about you, but I don't understand how you can wipe your phone, even if you try hard. So this raises the question whether there was a purposeful violation of law, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, destroying federal records, all sorts of conspiracy, the tried and true crime often present in situations like this. And this is what we need a criminal investigation of this. And I see the Senate, Ron Johnson has asked for the IG Chuck Grassley asked for the IG, but the IG
will be in 2024 by the time we get that answer. Yeah.
Right. and the IG uncovered this and didn't do anything about it. So I don't know if the IG is going to be the right vehicle. I think we need a criminal investigation. And if for anyone else, well, actually, we already know what happens when this happens in other circumstances. Remember Paul Manafort? They raided his home.
Right.
Part of the reason they raided his home because supposedly they worried about him destroying evidence. Maybe
it's time to raid Andrew Weissman's home. What do you think?
Yeah, who raids the DOJ?
Yeah, that's it. That's the key. That's the key thing here. I mean, when we keep going through these anecdotes and over time, you get to understand why the American public sees this dual justice system, right? Mike Flynn has one false statement. He gets charged with lying to the FBI. Andy McCabe makes 3 or 4. He doesn't get charged at all. Paul Manafort suspected of destroying evidence. They raided his home 2 years after the IG first discovered this, or a year after the IG discovered this. Nobody's done anything to check out what Andrew Weissman and the team Mueller did. When you hear 31, right? I mean, 1 or 2, one could say, all right, there was something weird that was going on. 31 means it's systemic, right? There's a systemic effort to wipe their phones.
Yeah, pandemic of wiping going on over there.
I like that.
When you have people wipe 2 or 3 phones, like Andrew Weissman did,
right?
I think 2 of the 3 phones he had were wiped.
Wow!
It just strains credulity, and it needs a further investigation. And this is on top of our finding that Mueller was indeed in the running for the FBI job.
That's
by
right.
Denials to the contrary. There's a Rod Rosenstein email. And Rosenstein says Mueller took himself, I don't have the exact quote here, but you'll have to trust me on it. Mueller took himself out of the running. He doesn't want to be considered anymore.
So you have the possibility of false testimony by the chief of the investigation, right?
That's right, because he was asked about whether he was interviewed for the job. He goes, oh, no, I was just advising the president on it. Well, the president says, I was interviewing him.
Wow.
And now we have confirmation that the president was right and that Mueller was potentially lying to Congress about whether or not he was up for the job and whether he wanted to be considered for it. Why else would you withdraw yourself from consideration for a job you weren't being considered for? And indeed, that was the same day he was hired as special counsel by Rosenstein.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the guys who were appointed to investigate crimes or may have been committing crimes themselves. Back in Watergate, there was a famous moment where 19 minutes of a tape disappeared, and I believe that was President Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods, who did that. But in this case here now, we have, as you said, an epidemic of destroyed evidence. You've got Christopher Steele admitting in Britain that he destroyed all of his documents of his contacts with the FBI. You've got Jonathan Weiner, the State Department official, acknowledging he destroyed official government records about his contacts with Christopher Steele and more than 110 dossiers that were created for the State Department, including the anti-Trump one. We've got Strzok and Page deleting some of their text messages, which required the IG to go on a wild goose chase. Now you got Robert Mueller. All this destruction of evidence. Don't you think that there should be an obstruction of justice investigation and charges forthcoming after all that we've seen publicly?
Yeah, the question is, have they even begun looking at this area? And
great question.
This is why your work is so important, our work is so important, because it will never be done without it being public. Because if left to their own devices, they simply won't investigate this. Or sometimes, to be fair, they may be investigating it, but they may not know about it because they didn't get the documents. It's pretty clear now that you have to have like 16 people asking for the same document 16 different ways.
Crazy,
in a row for it to come out.
Yeah.
We get stuff Congress gets. Congress gets stuff we don't get. You get stuff no one gets. And you can bet Durham's in the same boat. So, I've been complaining about them not being aggressive enough in DOJ. On the other hand, they're facing, either through government incompetence or dishonesty, significant obstruction.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the real question is. And when you look at the Durham investigation, I know you've been one from the beginning, appropriately so, skeptical of the possibility there would be significant accountability. We've got one conviction in the bag, so to speak, but one that a first-year law student could have made on the alteration of an email by an FBI lawyer by the name of Kleinsmith. Do you see other activity that would suggest more people are going to be indicted or punished, or are we at the end of the rope here?
Well, I've been skeptical of the additional indictments, although I have a little pause there because Peter Strzok was asked whether he was a target on CBS News the other day, and he didn't answer the question.
Yep.
So it suggests to me that perhaps he is a target.
And also, he hadn't been interviewed. Someone as critical as him hadn't been interviewed. Usually you don't interview the people you're going to charge until the end. And so, I read that the same way, Tom. That's an interesting perception.
And the difference between him and Brennan is Brennan's always said, I'm not a target. This is ridiculous.
Right.
Strzok didn't say that. And so in many ways, it may be too late to indict Strzok for political reasons, and they may decide not to do it. Or they may wait so long that after the election they do it and it gets undone by a new president, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But we'll see. I wouldn't rule a Strzok indictment out at this point, but who knows?
I was very perceptive. I had similar thoughts after seeing that interview. He was very evasive on that issue, and the fact that he hasn't been interviewed when he's such an important subject witness, to so much of what happened is a clue that something is up there. I had a story today on Hunter Biden and the fact that the State Department believed that a bribe payment had been made by his employer, Burisma, during the time he was on the board. There were stories last week that the president mentioned on China. You've done some remarkable work on Ukraine. How frustrated are you to see the mainstream media just ignore all of these stories that raise really legitimate questions about the ethics, the legal compliance of the Biden family?
Well, the media is just in the pocket of Joe Biden here. I mean, they've become complete partisans against President Trump, and that means protecting Joe Biden from the consequences of his and his family's scandalous behavior. And in the case of Ukraine, they've gone a step further. They now are labeling any questions about what happened in Ukraine part of Russia,
right?
The Russiagate scandal. So you're a Russian agent. I'm a Russian agent. We're all Russian agents for asking why it is Hunter Biden was getting walking around money from the Burisma board for his role on the Burisma board and for highlighting uncontroverted facts that Burisma was a corrupt company, as your new story documents.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And if you go back now and you take a look at the story that Adam Schiff and the whistleblower and the others weaved last year, we now know that almost all the tenets of the Democrat impeachment story on Ukraine are wrong. In fact, all the claims that there was nothing going on Hunter Biden's watch that should concern anyone have been disproven. All the claims that the evidence of concern was Russian disinformation gone, because it was the State Department itself. It was Barack Obama and Joe Biden's own people that were highlighting the wrongdoing going on in real time at Burisma. It's pretty remarkable that an entire impeachment proceeding was put together on the premise of false claims, false evidence, another Adam Schiff disinformation campaign. When will do you think that some of this stuff gets around the media and gets to the American public? Do you have confidence that people are beginning to understand the legitimate issues around the Biden family?
I think there's a significant hurdle with the media blackout on it, and it's really up to the president to highlight this issue personally.
Yeah.
Like with so many other public corruption issues, if he isn't talking about it, the media will ignore it.
That's the key.
By raising the issue of Biden, Burisma, and China, that will help educate Americans about what's out there. I mean, I'm sure the president doesn't want to talk about impeachment again, but the fact is those impeachment proceedings provided evidence, sworn evidence, that the Obama administration was concerned about what was going on with Burisma and Biden.
Yeah. And
it also showed that the folks responsible for Ukraine either ignored it or avoided the issue entirely, both with the Biden corruption issues out there with Burisma and the Ukrainian involvement in going after President Trump in 2016. They all knew it was happening. They didn't want to look at it. And as you point out, instead that they were more concerned about potentially illegally monitoring people like you and the president's son, Don Trump Jr. and Rudy Giuliani.
And yourself.
Their social media accounts. And
yeah.
we confirm that through documents as well. I don't think we've talked about that yet.
Yeah, no, that's such an important revelation. And again, another piece of fantastic work by Judicial Watch and you, Tom. You're on that list. There's a total of 13 people, all of them, or nearly all of them, people that are on Fox News or, chaired by the conservatives. When you look back at that now, does that feel like an enemies list? Do you feel like you were being monitored solely because you were doing, public interest work for the American public?
Well, to be clear, I'm not on the list.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That's right. You're not on there. That's right.
But you were. But that's exactly why you were being monitored.
That's right. I forgot. For a moment there, I had that's right.
And Giuliani, because they were asking questions, because these are the topics that they were interested in monitoring. This is out of the Ukrainian embassy,
right,
under Ambassador Yovanovitch, and the documents show they were monitoring all of those individuals we're talking about. And when they went for help for more monitoring in D.C. said, you can't do that. It's in violation of the Privacy Act.
Right.
And they were looking at not positive things you were saying about Ukraine and Soros and Biden, but criticism. So they were targeting you because you were seen as an attacker. They wanted to know what the attacks were. And that's wildly inappropriate and perhaps illegal.
It really is a scary thing. And I've been told, Tom, I learned this over the weekend, that a less redacted set of these documents are going to be going to the Senate, showing the admonition of illegality was much stronger. There's apparently some redacted sections of these memos where the embassy was told the only reason they were being asked to stop was because it violated the law. That seems to be important because the story that Ambassador Yovanovitch and some of the other State Department officials weaved during the impeachment was that they stopped it because they had a lack of resources. But if the real reason was they were told they were breaking the law, that would raise yet another question about someone's testimony. Do you think that could come public between now and Election Day?
Well, that's up to the Senate, and if they're being withheld improperly under FOIA, they should be releasing them generally
right.
to Judicial Watch. And I know you've been asking for them too. Yovanovitch's testimony needs to be examined even before this because she suggested that she didn't have much knowledge about what was going on. It was some vague social media monitoring because that's what they always do. And
right.
that simply wasn't true. So whether she committed perjury or not, that's more difficult legal question to figure out.
Right.
But certainly her testimony needs to be carefully examined. And since the House isn't doing anything, the Republicans in the least might want to start looking at that, because we know the Democrats aren't interested in doing any justice here at all.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's really the Senate Republicans and the White House that have the stick if they can get there. When you look out, you've got hundreds of important cases out there that you've been fighting over the last few years. What do you think are the next important shoes to drop? Which cases do you hope mature soon that could inform the public, not only about the election, but just about the overall conduct of their government? What are your favorites coming down the pike?
Well, we have several Biden lawsuits that, ought to be getting ripe in terms of production. I mean, the FBI is also sitting on a mother load of documents about Obamagate that can't come out soon enough, but they want to slow walk it. The challenge we're facing, John, is that the agencies know these documents are important, so they construct a process to not only withhold documents improperly, but to slow walk the material. There are Fauci records, for instance, his emails about communications with WHO, about China and coronavirus early on when the virus is just emerging. They've got a mother load of documents there. They don't want to release them to us in a timely way. They want to slow walk the release of the information. Wow. And on top of that, we've got all these election issues where we're suing to clean up the rolls and over the opposition of the states. So we got a lot of crises we're facing in terms of the rule of law and the way our government's being run, and how we're electing our government, that it's going to be a busy 50 to, well, frankly, the work never stops at Judicial Watch.
I was going to say, you've been going nonstop for decades now, and really one of the few places in the country left where transparency is achieved on a regular basis. I mean, it is pretty remarkable what Judicial Watch does. How many folks do you have working for you when you have lawyers and staff? Because you really run a small operation that does really outsized impact. I mean, what's it like to be in the inside of Judicial Watch? What's the team look like?
We have a little bit over 50 staff, about a dozen lawyers on staff, a team of investigators, obviously fundraisers. People should support our work, and
right.
We got a big educational component because that's what we do. We're an educational foundation. The goal is to educate people about what their government's up to, and use litigation to not only achieve justice and vindicate the rule of law, but the results of that, we can tell people about what's really going on. So it's a great team, and I'm out there talking about their great work. But for instance, this Mueller phone wipe scandal is the result of our investigations department asking for the documents in 2018, fighting and fighting and fighting. Finally, the lawyers come in, and our lawyers sue for it, and pushing and pushing and pushing in court, and we finally get the documents. So it's a team effort that requires diligence and commitment. It's
remarkable on many fronts that how long these things take. I don't think the average American appreciates the years that often go into, particularly the most controversial ones. You were still getting this year productions of materials from the 2016 mid-year Hillary Clinton email scandal, right? That were really relevant, like important new revelations. What's that like to know that when you start something like this, it may be 1, 2, 3, 4 years before you get to the bottom of the truth?
I mean, it's frustrating in some ways, but it's just the reality of our work. And these issues never go away. I mean, Hillary Clinton, for instance, wants to come back into the government. It's pretty clear.
That's right.
And so, we could have an attorney general, Hillary Clinton, or something like that. So it's never too late to get the records in terms of accountability. It is frustrating, though, that this Justice Department and this State Department continue to protect her. They just filed a brief a week or so ago asking Judge Royce Lamberth to shut down any further questioning of anything related to Clinton emails and the related Benghazi scandal. To me, which is such a betrayal of those Americans who expected accountability from the change in regime with the end of the Obama administration.
It is remarkable, and we're keeping in mind that Benghazi was 8 years ago this month. I mean, 8 years ago, and we still don't have the full thing. We don't really know the full story of what happened in the 2016 election as we head into the 2020 election. the ability of the permanent bureaucracy to thwart the American people from getting the truth is real, and we're so fortunate that you fight that bureaucracy every day and win far more often than anyone else I know in this arena. The going back to where we started to talk about the wiping of the phones is the next step. I know with Hillary Clinton, you want to interview her about Benghazi in the email. Is the next step to possibly ask for permission to interview or depose people like Andrew Weissman to figure out why they wiped these documents or these phones and what could have been on the phones when they were wiped?
Oh, well, that's a whole different question, whether or not there's enough there to get discovery on this issue. I don't know, because the question is, did it impact Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, other places we had pending?
Right.
And that answer might be yes, but we'll have to look at that. But that's exactly the sort of questions that we'll be asking. And at the Justice Department, we're honest. That's the sort of part of the criminal inquiry that they'd be looking at as well.
The unmasking word is that there's going to be a new list of unmasked names that will show a much wider universe of Trump people being unmasked and monitored by the Obama administration in the last months of the Obama term. The revelations that led to Russiagate, to Obamagate as we now call it, all started originally with the concern that you and I and others had, Devin Nunes, about unmasking. As that comes full circle, what have we learned about the intelligence community's and the political appointees' propensity to use intercepted phone records, intercepted conversations to spy on their enemies, their colleagues? Is it as bad as a Snowden once portrayed? Are we in an era now where the primary protections of our civil liberties are eroded by this backdoor?
Yes, certainly if there's no one going to jail for doing it improperly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have this technique available for emergency use in a national security crisis when there's a pending terrorist threat. That's how it was sold to us. And many of us on the conservative side were like, okay, well, we understand our civil libertarian concerns, but we have to trust the cops, right? We have to trust the FBI. We have to trust the government. Well, that trust, there's no reason for it anymore. And we can presume that it's thoroughly corrupted, and it will remain thoroughly corrupted, and there can be no reason to trust as long as those who broke the law, as many it seems did, aren't held accountable.
Great point.
Because you can have all the reforms in the world. I mean, the law already prevented it from happening. The rules already prevented it from happening in the past. But because there was no sanction for misconduct, it just continued and it didn't matter. And why would we expect things to change if there continues to be no sanction for breaking the rules?
Yeah, that deterrence factor is what's been missing from the FBI's, particularly the FBI's misconduct for a long time. It's, there are great rules and great procedures. If the Woods procedures were followed, we wouldn't have had Carter Page targeted for 12 months because the Wood procedures would have captured the problems and it would have fallen apart quickly. But it's the failure to follow, and then the fact that there's really just no penalty. It creates the temptation for the next set of rules to be broken just as easily. And that may be the final judgment that the American people render on Russiagate, which is a lot of wrongdoing, but we didn't fix the system because the temptation to do it hasn't been eroded by deterrence. Final thoughts as you look out over the next 60 days, and you have great political instincts. So you're in the public education business. What is important for the Trump administration, the federal agencies, your lawsuits to focus on in these final 50 plus days of the election?
Well, if I were the president, I'd just do this as a matter of policy anyway, irrespective of the election. But, let's say that his term ends in January, or let's say it begins another 4 years. I mean, for the reasons we're talking about, he should go on a transparency tear. There should be a transparency revolution where he tells all the agencies, enough with the stonewalling. There's no reason to dribble this information out. Get it all out. Stop with the fake redactions. Stop with the abusive exemptions, that blackout information. We want the world to know about what happened here on this terrible corruption, the worst corruption scandal in American history. If it's the worst corruption scandal in American history, then it should be all hands on deck in terms of transparency. and enough with the abuse of FOIA that's been allowed to fester for years here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's funny, I was talking to a FOIA officer just a few months ago, and I mentioned your name. Is there any pending Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, things of that? I'll remember this like it was yesterday. The FOIA officer said, "Oh my God, I lay awake at night worrying about the next Tom Fitton filing." So you've definitely put some people on notice in these federal agencies that you're not going to take no for an answer when the American people deserve yes. And for that, the entire American public, regardless of your political stripe, really owes you and Judicial Watch a great debt of gratitude, of honor for what you've done. And we here at John Solomon Reports Just the News, we're going to be following everything you do because you bring to light a lot of the misconduct that the bureaucrats have tried to hide for many, many years. So, Tom, we're grateful, and we hope to have you back on the show real soon.
Well, thank you, John, and we really appreciate your old-fashioned investigative journalism as well. If only there were even 3 more journalists who did that type of work in this town, we'd be a lot better off.
We're trying to grow a new generation, just like you grew a generation of great lawyers committed to transparency. That's what we're trying to do at Just the News. So hopefully a few years from now, we'll be a little bigger, and we'll be talking about 10 or 12 other reporters. But it's an important time for the American public to have people fighting for the truth, and you are on the front line of that battle every day, and we're very thankful.